Topic 6 is dealing with problems. You know, anytime you have more than one person in a room, you have a potential problem on your hand. But we're talking about problems in our marriage. And the first question is a very interesting one. It is, how do you address problems within yourself?
Your wife said it earlier. Examine ourselves. We have to examine ourselves honestly. And sometimes we have to ask someone else to examine us too, because we may not see it still, or we don't want to see it. And so we might need help saying we're wrong, or we're doing something not well, and so we can fix it.
I would definitely say, I mean, if it's a situation or if it's an issue or if it's a problem that you're aware of, obviously that's a little bit different or a lot different than a problem or situation that you may not be aware of. But you have to have trust in God that His model, His plan for things is effective. So if you're already married, your wife or your husband or your spouse, whoever it is, being able to talk to you about that, right? Or maybe it's somebody at church and one of the elders or just another brother or sister coming to you about something they've noticed or seen. So you have to, one thing I would say for sure is that you have to have trust that God knows what He's talking about, that His words are true, and that the models and relationships and things that He's set up for us to be a part of are effective if we allow them to. And it comes back to just being able to examine ourselves and have an open, honest heart about things and about yourself. I think that's one area that it starts. I think when it comes to problems that you know you have, depending on what it is, I mean, well, maybe not depending on what it is, you have to be able to go to any extent you need to, especially if there's sin involved, right, in that problem. If there's sin involved in that problem with yourself, you have to go to any extent you need to, get any kind of help you need to get rid of that, to make that not a problem anymore. And that's a very general statement, but it's definitely true. I mean, you know, you can't allow sin to be a part of your life.
And I know sometimes, the question, how do you address problems with yourself, could refer to anything. I mean, it could be a feeling you have, or it could be one that involves sin. It could also be a view I have of something he's doing, but he's not the problem. I'm the problem. That's where I feel like that self-examination really comes in. The old topic of conversation about, well, he dumps his clothes on the floor or whatever. You know, that's the proverbial, we always talk about that wives get upset with husbands. Well, maybe I don't have a hamper for him. You know, maybe it's really my fault that I didn't arrange that. Or maybe I just didn't talk to him about it. Or if it's something with me, if it's a problem I have with him, but really maybe it's me and I'm irritated about something, or I'm tired, or I need to go back to, why do I feel that way? And is it really that important?
We need to find out what the source is. And it may be with me. But until you find the source of the problem, it's not going to be fixed. And it may require the person who loves me the most, my spouse, that I go to for some assistance in that. It may not be between us. It may be some other characteristic or situation that arises. But your spouse is going to be the one that loves you the most and can be honest with you. And sometimes it winds up being brutally honest. But then your ego, again, needs to get out of the way. If you're really interested in correcting that or solving that problem. Humility, lack of ego is necessary in so many parts of our life, but especially in resolving any issues that you feel you have, especially those that you may be causing. Linda touched on it. What if the problem is with your spouse?
This is one that on paper is just as simple, just as straightforward. You need to be honest in assessing it, pray to God for help, go to them in love, but it's a whole lot harder to do that in reality. It's difficult. Because you don't want to come off as being mean. I think you sometimes just think that they're going to take it. They may take it wrong, and that's your own problem. And it better be important. If it's not really important, then it's not really a problem. If it is truly a problem, if it's truly important, if we don't go to them, we're not loving them, and we're not loving God then. So we do have to find a way to go to them, spirit of love, and talk to them.
I think this one's easier for me to say what you don't do. And I mean, one big thing is, you don't go to your friends and talk about it. You don't go to your mom and talk about it. Because at the end of the day, when you and your spouse have worked it out, you still love your spouse no matter what. Your friends and your mom didn't love your spouse as much as you did. And you can forgive and forget. It's harder for those people to forgive and forget. And also, you can destroy someone's reputation or how other people feel about them, and that's not really necessary to get it resolved. That's not really loving them like you're supposed to or being kind to them. You handle it as much as you can just between the two of you, just like it says to you, go to the brother. It's the same thing when it's your spouse,
And it's one of those, if you can't between you, then you get a third party involved, whether it be a counselor, preacher, whatever. Again, you don't go to the family because now you're tainting their opinions of that person. And they're just hearing your side of the story.
Yeah.
And we can see the story through rose-tinted glasses, and we come out smelling like a rose on our side of the story when it could very well be our fault that we're in the mess we're in the first place.
And as you mentioned, you don't want to tear them down. You want to do it with love and gentleness in a way that if there's sin involved, like you were talking about, that can be fixed. But if it's a problem without sin involved, communication, for example, could be one thing. Well, you want to make sure that your spouse knows you're coming from a place of love and it's a concern, and it would help you if we were to work on that.
We have to realize that we're different people with different, I can't think of what the term is, but she for a long time had an issue with me because she would be relaying a story to me, or she would just tell me something and I wouldn't react, I wouldn't reply, and she could just not figure out how I could be so inconsiderate as to not reply. And years ago at work, we did the personality assessments, and they would break down the categories and read what I came out at, and then I they would explain what all the different ones were, and so then I relayed that to her, and it was like the big light went off. She understood why I don't reply. Now, when she asked a question, I reply. But if she says it's going to be 103 today, I'll just keep driving because if she
need a
says
reaction to
if,
that.
yeah, if she says what is the temperature going to be today, well then I do need to reply, even if I don't know. I had no reason to reply because of the personality type I am. So at least with her seeing that and understanding it, it definitely makes communication a little bit easier. Now she knows if she wants to reply, either form it in a question or say, I still need you to give me some feedback. And I can.
I feel where you're coming from, but whatever your personality is,
I thought I noted that from Heather's
we're the
glance.
Yes.
Could you tell?
we're the same personality. But it's worse now
Because
because her dad is just like her. So he'll be in the kitchen and say, it's 103 today, and I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. And he's like, it's
Did
pretty
you
hot,
hear
isn't
me,
it?
Wade?
It's pretty hot, isn't it, Wade? And I'm like, yeah, it's hot. I don't need to, so I got 2 of them in my house that need responses. But, so I understand where you're coming. But, back to the question of, helping address the problems in your spouse, you have to let them know, obviously, that you're there to help. So whatever they need from you to help them with it, whether it's something small like get them a hamper. Like, well, you never got me a hamper, so I just figured this is where I need to put the clothes. Okay, I'll get you a hamper, and hopefully, whatever you need to do to help them, at the same time doing it to help them be like if it's more serious, help them be accountable for those things. But let them know and say, ask them, well, okay, whatever this is, whether it's something small or up to something that's very serious with sin involved, what do you need from me to help you fix this or overcome that? What is it? You tell me and I'll do it. I'll help you. So sometimes putting it back on them, because they may not, man, as weird as it sounds, after 19 years of marriage, there might be a time I'm thinking, man, and it might be something small, hopefully, right? I'm just like, man, I don't want to ask her about this. This is kind of silly or dumb if I ask her to, like, I'm having an issue with this little, whatever it is. But, that's what they're there for. So you need to let them know, you tell me what's going to help. What's going to help this problem get better, get fixed, or this sin, we work on it, and so you don't have those temptations anymore. You tell me what needs to be done from my, whether it's small or big, right? So then they know, okay, because sometimes you need that affirmation, even though you've been married to them, even though that's your spouse, you need that to hear that they're willing to help you do whatever it is to take care of the problem.
So what I'm seeing here is that there's an attitude that needs to be checked on both sides. If I have a problem with me and it involves sin, or even if it doesn't, I can talk to my wife to ask for assistance. I may have to ask for forgiveness. And that's where the humility and sincerity comes in. But in talking to my spouse about a perceived problem, I need to remember, like Linda mentioned, we heard before, we're both children of God. We need to approach it in humility, and we need to approach it wanting a resolution if one can be attained. Of course, in that, we have to decide whether it's important or not. Obviously, if it's not a sinful situation, we need to figure out if it's important to us or not. Now let's look at not just issues with me or issues with Linda, your spouse, but issues in your marriage. They're going to arise. How do we address those problems?
We have to talk about them. We have to discuss them. It's one of those things too. you might think, oh, it's just a small issue, it's a small problem, it will go away. And there's a chance it will go away. There's also a chance that that little small will become bigger and bigger, and it may not even get bigger and bigger, but I'll just go back to the clothes being left out, the dirty clothes. If it annoys you on day one and you don't say anything, and it still annoys you on day two and you don't say anything, and you wait till day 98 to say something, it's going to be a lot harder to do it kindly, lovingly, in the right way than if we just talk about it up front. But, so if you do perceive that there's an issue in your marriage, you got to talk about it and say, like, this is what I'm seeing. And please tell me I'm just way off base. But but if you can't talk to your spouse about that, what can you talk to them about? And if you don't talk about it, it will not get better.
I think also picking the right time to talk about it. I learned that early in our marriage. My time to think about stuff is at bedtime. That is not Wade's time to talk or think about stuff because he will fall asleep in the middle of it. And so, you have to know each other. And especially now with kids, you're not really by yourselves hardly ever. And then if your dad lives upstairs, you're really not by yourself ever. So you have to really make an effort to schedule a time if there's the conversation that you need to have, and schedule it, set it ahead of time, tell the person we're going to talk about this thing, whatever, not catch them off guard. I've learned that about Wade too. I can come up with a comment pretty easy, just whatever. I'll just say something. But Wade takes more time. He likes to think about it. He doesn't just say words like I do. And so I have to give him time to think about it, or it's not a fair discussion. So just getting to know your spouse and knowing when to talk about something is also a huge part of it.
I think another thing is you don't just word vomit everything all at once on them, because now you've just given them this big old pile to digest. You've had how long to prepare?
Right.
You've already debated it, won the argument and everything in your brain, and now you've just dumped it and you've walked away and left them with this pile. And nothing got resolved. I've done it on trivial things. When COVID hit and he had to work from home, so now his desk is in my bedroom. I had a desk in the breakfast nook, but I also had Bella's craft stuff. And Bella, little by little, weaseled me out of my space. He had literally just got off a conference call, and I word vomited, "You don't even care, she's weaseling me out of my space and leaving me." He's like, "I didn't know you were being weaseled out of your space. You didn't tell me." But I literally word vomited it all and left him with it in his lap and went to my patient.
I'll vouch for that.
Right. And as I'm driving my patient, I'm like, that was the worst thing you could have just did. Now this poor man is sitting there thinking, what did I do? I didn't do anything.
So our approach is really important. And there are
Huge.
times that the problems we have are way more serious than other problems. The laundry's not really a problem, okay? So scheduling a time, totally agree. You need a time to have those conversations. And sometimes that's difficult when you're working or you have kids around, so you do that. But in that time and the attitude with which you address the problem, I think is important. So if I know I've done something to hurt him, I need to apologize, but I need to be careful how I'm going to put that on. Or if there's something he's doing that is bothering me, we need to sit. I read a long time ago, and I really do believe this is important. It's very difficult to be mad at somebody you're holding hands with.
Oh.
That touch is important. It's hard to yell at somebody when you're doing that. So if you'll sit across from each other, eye to eye, and hold hands, you're calmer in your approach for what you're going to say. And I do think we need to predetermine how we're going to approach our spouse because we do know them and we know what works, what's going to just shut them off where they're not going to listen, or how to get the most productive conversation with that effort of solving it.
And what an appropriate time to pray, to begin the conversation. It's bound to be important. It's bound to have us thinking about what God would have us do and how to be kind and loving and understanding in making this, or in approaching this problem and understanding how we can resolve it.
One thing, I mean, going back to, I mentioned earlier in Ephesians chapter 4, be angry, do not sin, do not let the sun go down on your wrath. So like Bud was saying earlier, if it's something that is just kind of annoying you, like the socks or the laundry, I mean, yes, you should still not let that fester. But I mean, if it's something that's of any significance, I can't let myself go to sleep, right? I mean, if it really comes down to that, you deal with the problem when the problem's there and you know about it. You don't allow it to keep going and y'all get more and more, because then you lose focus of what the problem. Sometimes you can lose focus of what the problem really is. You just get to a point where you're just mad at each other. You really don't even remember necessarily why you're upset or fighting. And hopefully it's something that can be resolved. But that's talking about earlier, like finances and all those things that can cause really big problems and issues. So it's got to be something that gets addressed with some urgency, if it's a matter of urgency, for sure.
I used to do a thing to Wade too when we were first married where I would collect things that I was upset about. And because I didn't get mad every day. I didn't get mad about everything he did. And so I felt like I was doing good. But what I did do is collect those things. So then when I did decide to talk to him about something and get mad about something, then I would talk about that one thing and then we would get that resolved. And then I would say, also, this and this and this. And I have a best friend who might have also done the same thing. So we talked about it together. And that's what we would do. And so we would feel good about ourselves because we're like, we haven't been mad all week. We haven't gotten upset. But we were collecting them. So when we did get upset, then we could talk about all the things. And that's not really fair.
I was going to bring up, and I'm not doing it because of this, but I have right here 1 Corinthians 13. And I think it might be good if we just think about that for a minute. Starting in verse 4, Paul talks about the attributes of love, and this could be towards our neighbors, our children, but I think it's really important here with our spouse. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Verse 7 is the one I think about a lot, and I did, as my first marriage was going to an end, verse 7 was in my head every single day. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. The believes all things, I can work up a whole case of something he may have done and why he did it. But he probably didn't even know he was doing it, to be honest. Because if the situation's flipped and I'm doing something that's irritating him and causing a big problem, I probably don't even know I'm doing it. And until it's honestly shared with me in a loving way, I really would like him to believe the good. Instead of believing there's an underlying motive or something, I feel like that tears marriages apart. Believe the good. Always believe the good. I do have a reputation for trying to come up with the positive in every situation. But I think it comes from this verse. We have to. So making that list. You know, I'm not mad at him today, but I got myself a list.
Just in case.
I was going to say that before you brought that up, so I'm not targeting you. But I do think this is super important because it's going to keep that mountain from developing. Sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. Pretty soon, that is so big, you can't overcome it. And then you're either going to live in misery or you're going to do something worse. And so I think that's really important.
Again, just thinking about God as the centerpiece, going back to the Old Testament, you look at how patient he was with the Israelites, right? For generations after generation. Yes, he would punish them, but I mean, he still showed mercy and patience to them. I mean, it's undescribable, really, to think about. And then obviously Christ, what being on that cross and being accused and all those things he went through. So sometimes, I mean, we're ideally, hopefully, these problems that you're having can be resolved. But if it's not for the reason that God said that you can get a divorce, you're stuck with. And so if that problem is something that they're not going to work on, or it takes years and years and years, I mean, it's not, I mean, hopefully it's something you can address and you can get over. But, you know, depending on the other spouse, whatever situation whatever happens, you know, it's just that patience has, I mean, you got to keep showing love and patience, like here. So, and that, you don't want to think that that might be somebody's marriage, but I mean, it can be. And chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians has to be what you're doing, no matter what.
I mean, to be totally transparent, like you said, you can think up things, you can make a story. But I came in with a different set of baggage. I had divorced parents, and my mom had biblical reason to get divorced. So now I'm going into a marriage. Somebody's a little late. Well, why is he late? What's he doing? And you're like dreaming that you're telling these stories in your brain, and you're reacting to things because of whether it be PTSD, whatever term you want to use from your childhood. I had a spouse who loved me enough to say, I don't know who you need to talk to, but I'm tired of paying for your father's sins. And I was like, ooh, that hurt. And I was angry. I was like, I don't know if I want to stay here anymore. But then I thought, and I went and talked to that third party. She's like, what is your hand in this? I'm like, he's the one that's, no. But what is your hand? You reacted to what he said. He was being kind. He was being loving. He was trying to tell you what the problem was. And sometimes your spouse has to solve the problems in your marriage, say, either we need to go, or you need to go, or I need to go. Who needs to go? Because sometimes we just can't handle it all by ourselves.
And I think that in these moments of conflict and difficulties, we also need to realize that there's not a winner and a loser. There's a winner. There are winners in this resolution that's about to take place. Compromise might need to take place. Certain precautions might need to take place in certain situations. But the end result, we need to remember that we entered into a covenant. We gave our word that we would follow God's plan in this marriage. And that needs to be the underlying idea in every situation that arises, to honor that covenant. If for nothing more, that covenant, but we always have people watching. Our children are watching, our friends are watching, people that we don't even know are watching. And so we need to do the right thing.
There are highs and lows in your life. There's highs and lows in your marriage. And that's just the way it is. Sometimes everything's rocking along in a good way, and sometimes you're tired or whatever. We just need to work on that together.
One other thing very quickly. How do you end these discussions of difficulties?
I've got a couple of verses I was thinking about for that. 1 Corinthians 6, 7 and 8. Now this passage, when Paul's writing the church at Corinth, he is certainly talking about brethren suing one another in civil court. He's not talking about a marriage relationship here, but he says, now therefore it is already an utter failure for you that you go to law against one another. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? No, you yourselves do wrong and cheat, and you do these things to your brethren. Just the thought process of, and we're not talking about a sinful situation. We're not talking about anything like that. We're just talking about things not going your way. Just let it go. It's not even being cheated, but it's like, just let it go. It's not worth rehashing through your mind. Just if you could just let it go and move on when it's truly not a big issue. You're only making it a big issue in your head. And then Proverbs 15, 1 and 2, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. I mean, that goes to a lot of what we talked about, the word vomit and the different things, but it's just, if we're soft about it, if we force that tongue to, use knowledge rightly and be loving, we can dissipate the disagreement and move forward with our relationship and still know that, if it's a little pet peeve or it's something, I can make an adjustment so that she doesn't even have to think about it again, and vice versa.
And would do so willingly
Yes,
to bring about
wanting to do it.
that submitting to one another. And at the end of this, an affirmation of your love for one another. And the way we started with a prayer.
Yep.
We'll next look at balancing career and family.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.